Well, hello and welcome. Glad you could join our webinar today on planning for Copilot for Microsoft Rollout. I'm Dan Callahan. I'm an engagement manager here at NetWoven, and we are totally excited to have you participate in the webinar today. Here's what we're going to be talking about. So I will make some introductions for our speakers, and then we will go through and cover the various copilots that Microsoft has in play. We're going to talk about what opportunities exist for you to use Copilot for Microsoft 365 in your organization. We're also going to talk about some of the challenges that exist in rolling it out. And I can tell you when it comes to challenges, Microsoft changed the name of the product on Monday and changed the pricing structure. So we've been very busy people here trying to make sure all of our presentation materials are up to date. Then we're going to talk about NetWoven's best practices for for implementing Copilot for Microsoft 365. We'll have a little poll and then we'll wrap up with some Q&A. All right, so let's get started. First of all, we want to let you know we are in the third webinar regarding Purview. You can see that we're also having webinars on 15th of February, 14th of March, and the 18th of April. So we hope you can join us for each of those webinars as well. All right, let's talk about our speakers. So I've introduced myself. We're going to have Matt Marr, our technical director here at NetWoven, talk to you about Copilot for Microsoft 365. Matt's been around long enough that he's been through several product name changes when it comes to Microsoft Cloud products. We also have Gwen Blakemore here. Gwen is a senior specialist in the modern workplace practice at Microsoft. And Gwen, let me turn it over to you and give you a chance to introduce yourself a little more and say a few words.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I am super thrilled to be here today. So by way of introduction, I'm Gwendolyn Blakemore. I'm a modern workplace specialist with a focus on ensuring our customers are able to navigate all things communication, collaboration, and employee experience, what we call the modern workplace. And of course, what we're here to talk about today, Microsoft 365 Copilot. And this thing is completely changing how we go to work. It's rocking the business world right now. You know, I like to say that Microsoft 365 Copilot isn't just it's another tool. How many tools do we get, every year from different companies? But it's like this superhero or a sidekick, right? That comes in to help you get your work done day to day. Someone once told me that I was similar to the Ask Jeeves of a role that I had held at Microsoft. And when I think of Copilot, I think of Copilot as being that super smart buddy that knows how to navigate, get around, knows all the shortcuts, right? And also can crunch some numbers and write some gorgeous words for you. And it's like being the Ask Jeeves of work, but on steroids, much, much better than I could be, right? So it's really all boils down to how do we make your work day just a little bit easier, much more productive. We know that we have a lot of tasks that we need to get done every day, and how do we do that quicker? And if I join a meeting a little late, how do I catch up so I can be right in the sauce? I know exactly where we are in a meeting that I have joined late. So all of that being said, Copilot is just, I think you're going to be really impressed with what you're going to see today. And listen, if you know Microsoft, right, we are only successful because of the partnerships that we have. So we want to make sure that our customers are able to not only license a piece of solution or a product, right, but actually get into that and be successful. So we partner with partners like NetWoven to ensure that you are ready to take those next steps before you're even going down the path. Are you secure? what does your security environment look like? What do you need to do to shore up any holes that might be in that environment to make sure that you're not oversharing Copilot with the wrong people within your organization, right? And NetWoven is equipped to help you navigate this whole new world of generative AI. It's all new for everyone, right? So how do you do it? How do you do it wisely and hit the ground running? Minimize as many pitfalls as possible and make sure that your starts aren't false and you can go ahead and start leveraging the technology. So with that, I cannot wait to see what is going to be presented today. I'm pretty sure everybody will be pretty impressed with what we have. And I'll go ahead and turn the floor back over to NetWoven. Thank you for
All
having me
right.
here.
Great. Thank you, Gwen. Thank you for all of that. Hopefully we can live up to those high praise and expectations that you have listed. Now, before I turn it over to Matt, I want to tell you a little bit about NetWoven. We are a Microsoft partner, as Gwen says. We're well embedded with Microsoft. We're a member of the Microsoft Intelligent Security Association. You can see that Gartner has rated us as one of the leaders in this space. We can work with Microsoft's Fast Track program and so on. So if you have a need, I think we can help you, and we'd love to do that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt to carry on the show.
Hey, everybody. Excited to be here with you all. Thank you for taking time out of your day to talk through Copilot and how your organization can prepare for it. A little bit about me. I think Dan mentioned I come from a collaboration and security background. So a lot of the lenses I look at technologies with is how much better is it with productivity, as well as how secure is it. So I'm going to take just a brief couple minutes to talk through the various Copilots that Microsoft offers. As you guys might know, Microsoft loves to rebrand certain things and then also change names on the fly. And so just this week, we got the new rebranding for Copilot for Microsoft 365. So this used to be called Microsoft 365 Copilot just last week, but now we have these new announcements from Microsoft. They're making it more available. So before this week, you needed to commit to at least 300 seats of the license type to roll out Copilot for Microsoft 365. And we didn't have any options for individuals. So now, in the future, right now, we have both of those. We have Copilot Pro, which was announced at the beginning of the week. This is for your personal use. If you have a Live ID or a Hotmail account, you can go sign up and access Copilot within all of your Microsoft 365 apps. So Office, basically, Word, Excel, Outlook. That's the Copilot Pro. So that's individual. It also gives you up-to-date access to the latest models that are being produced. So GPT 4.5 Turbo. Whenever next ones come out, you'll have that access to the new model, whereas the free version will not. But we're not here to talk about individuals. We're here to talk about the enterprise grade. And so that is this Copilot for Microsoft 365. And the Copilot for Microsoft 365, just, again, now, if you have use cases where only 5 people in your organization need Copilot use, you can now enable them to do that. There's no longer that 300 seat license requirement. All right, so Copilot within the enterprise still has a lot of different flavors. So the first one is Microsoft Copilot, and this was rebranded at the beginning of the year from Bing Chat Enterprise. If you remember last year, a lot of organizations started rolling this out to be the competitor to ChatGPT. Now, Microsoft Copilot is basically just open to the outside world. So you don't really have many concerns around it accessing your corporate data like you do with Copilot for Microsoft 365. So things you can do with Microsoft Copilot, it's like what you can do with ChatGPT, right? Ask it to draft a summary or draft 10 bullet points on successful migrations to Outlook, that type of stuff. It uses the knowledge that it has from the internet and returns back your responses. Copilot for Microsoft 365, which now is only $30 a month, you get access to those same type of prompts, but it's based on your context and your company data. So now things start to get interesting, right? You can start to summarize meetings that you had. You can summarize long statements of work that your company has put together. And you can do that within the Microsoft 365 app. So you don't have to go to a website to query it. You can use the embedded apps inside of Office to make those prompts. The next level of copilots that Microsoft has released are kind of based off of your role. So we have a copilot for security. This copilot for security has access to Sentinel and the security graph, and you can ask it questions about your security. Copilot for sales, right, has access in Dynamics. GitHub Copilot. There are all of these role-specific copilots that, again, we're not going to talk about them in this presentation, but just be aware that if your use case is to solve a very specific role, there are other copilots out there that might be more effective. And then the last type of copilot Microsoft offers is your custom-built copilots. You can build your own copilots, kind of like a chatbot or a virtual agent using Copilot Studio or Azure OpenAI Studio. Again, we're not going to talk about those in this presentation, but understand that these are the 4 different types of copilots Microsoft offers enterprises. So diving into the Copilot for Microsoft 365, this is the one that has access to your company's data. So Copilot combines this large language model, an LLM, with your data through the graph, right? So it has access to your emails, your chat, your documents, meetings, and much more, right? Microsoft 365 apps like Office, Word, Excel exposes this model, right? So you're in context of the app that you're using and accessing your company data. So Copilot isn't just a better way of doing something. It's kind of like a new way of doing something. And with that presents challenges, right? Certainly around the adoption and change management aspect of technology, but also with security. So Copilot's integrated in 2 different ways. First, it's in those apps, like I mentioned, so that you can become more creative within Word or more productive inside of Outlook or collaborative inside of Teams. And secondly, Copilot is built on top of the comprehensive approach from Microsoft to security, compliance, privacy, and responsible AI. So you know it's ready for your organization because Microsoft built it with these principles in mind. Responsible AI has come up in the news a couple times in the past couple months. So I thought I'd touch briefly on Microsoft's responsible AI principles. There's 6 of them in total, right? We have fairness, responsibility, safety, privacy, security, inclusiveness. Those are kind of the 4 main ones that are then underpinned by 2 foundational principles of transparency and accountability. If you are concerned that your data is going to be used to train a LLM like ChatGPT, don't worry, it's not, right? Microsoft's not going to be using your data to train its models without your permission. It's using your data as retrieval to its LLM, the large language model. So hopefully this puts a lot of people's concerns at rest, Microsoft does have a very robust RAI model in place, and it's fairly publicized how well responsible AI is taken into consideration at Microsoft. All right, so now we kind of know what Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365 is, right? It's your data. It's built on security, compliance, and privacy, protected by your organization's security partitions, integrated into the apps that your users already use every day. And you, as the user, are in control of what data it has access to or can share. So now let's talk about those opportunities. And I'm hoping that everybody understands the opportunities of generative AI. Some of the ones that Microsoft touts in terms of Copilot is, again, it lets you become more productive inside of Outlook. You can ask it to summarize an email thread so that you don't have to read it, or highlight the action items that are assigned to me. You can be more productive. It also allows you to be more expressive in PowerPoint by creating slides, text that speaks to your story better. More analytical in Excel, more creative in Word, and then more collaborative inside of Teams, right? So Copilot for Microsoft 365 is promising us all of this stuff to be better in each one of these categories. And I kind of look at it as it's more productive and creative and collaborative than any of the tools that we have access to today. So with this, generation defining technology, there are going to be challenges. And so when we've talked to customers about rolling out Copilot, and when we see it in the wild, what are some of the big changes these organizations have when rolling out Copilot for Microsoft 365? And they kind of fall into a couple buckets, security, governance, legality, change management and adoption, cost. And so what we've put together is kind of some highlighted bullets about each one of these concerns. So in terms of security, there was a great study that on average, about 10% of companies' M365 data is open to all employees. So if you're old enough and remember when we enabled search, SharePoint search, and then the day after, we all had to turn it off because we had improperly permissioned data in our SharePoint. Think of that, but tenfold, because now it's not just improperly permissioned SharePoint, but it's graph connectors. It's emails that have gotten lost, or shared mailboxes that you didn't know you had access to. So ensuring that your repositories are permissioned correctly is a big challenge. And unfortunately, there's no silver bullet for this one. You can iteratively make progress through each of the workloads and talk through, run reports to see how, the SharePoint sites that have most usage or most members, but you do it workload by workload. So that's a real big challenge, because you really do want to lock that down prior to turning on your Copilot licenses. The next data security concern is, okay, I've created some generative AI content based on sensitive documents. Well, that sensitivity label doesn't copy over into the new document that you're creating. So if I asked, Copilot for Microsoft 365 to come up with a product roadmap for a software that my company is developing, and it churns through my data and uses sensitive documents about our roadmap and our competitors, and I put that into a document and forget to tag it properly, then that is essentially data leak, right? We've taken data from a secure location and put it into an insecure location. So making sure that we're up to date with our sensitivity labels in DLP policies is huge. And then another data security challenge that companies run into is encryption, right? Luckily, if you're using modern Microsoft Purview information protection, your encrypted documents can be full text searched through Graph and be available. However, if you're using older RMS technology or non-Microsoft encryption, you might not have access, or the Graph might not have access to those documents. And so now you have a bucket of documents that are not available to be part of your Copilot. Similar to security is governance, right? This is the number one that we get when we turn on Copilot here at NetWoven. We hit it day one, which is stale or irrelevant data. So not having the right retention policies in place. At NetWoven, we have a 7-year retention on most content. However, if you don't specify in your prompt to Copilot to pull back the piece of information within the last year, so like what was the most successful project NetWoven did around Jive? You know, it might pull back a project 7 years ago, and that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something more recent so that I could, you know, talk about that. So retention policies are a great way to get stale data out of your tenant, but also understand that you're going to need some user behavior that, you know, they need to express what they're looking for in the prompts that they're giving to Copilot. Another concern around governance are these graph connectors. I think it's great that the graph can reach into ServiceNow, into, you know, Workday, into some of these other repositories. But if those graph connectors are not implementing the same controls that that source repository has, then you're kind of bypassing the source data governance. And so you have to be conscious of that. And so an easy one to do when rolling out Copilot is look at your graph connectors, see what you have in place currently, and whether they're going to obey the data governance from the source repositories. There's also concern around data residency. So if you are in a multi-geo tenant and you're required by law to store you know, European data in European data centers, or, you know, German data in German data centers, you're covered. Microsoft covers you with the multi-geo tenants, and you're good. However, if you start prompting Copilot to return back, you know, generate a document based on my colleague so-and-so's research, if you have access to that data that's living in a European data center, and now you make it yours, we now have a concern around that data residency. It's no longer obeying what the EU laws are, and it's now living outside. So this kind of leads us to our third category of challenges, is the legal challenges. And this is a quicksand, ever-moving target here. Earlier in the year, New York Times, you know, sued what was it, OpenAI and Microsoft for training its LLMs on copyrighted data. Well, you can see that same situation happening within your organization. If you go and download NetWoven's ebook on, you know, Copilot or Microsoft Purview, if a user prompts, you know, user has access to that now, and they create a prompt to generate your top 10 purview roadmap ideas, if it uses some of that copyrighted data, then you have a legal concern because you've created this based off of an unlawful or copyrighted data. So user training is huge here, making sure that your users understand when to use Copilot and generative AI and when not to. Also understand that certain countries and regions have guidelines around responsible AI. Just last year, the White House put an executive order out that any LLMs being trained had and being used on government data, the developers had to submit their test cases of responsible AI to the government. Now, luckily, Copilot isn't a LLM. You're not training the LLM, so you're not subject to that one. However, there are other regions out there that have guidelines around responsible AI and that you need to obey. And then the last legal concern is just the inaccuracy and bias sometimes that these responses come back. So if you asked Copilot from Microsoft to generate a product brochure of your recent product, and it pulls back features that were part of the roadmap but never implemented, you go ahead and publish that without checking, it's going to be inaccurate, and then you're going to have, you're falsely marketing your product. So, having the users understand this really is what we're after, is training and adoption around these technologies. So speaking of adoption, yeah, this is a big one. This is, I think, by far the biggest one out there. These are not just a better way of doing something. These are a new way of doing something. And so we need to train our end users. We also want to be amplifying those success stories. There's too many times that I drop into a Reddit channel or Discord and someone's making fun of how, ChatGPT misunderstood my sarcasm. Well, yeah, that's understandable, but you're not seeing the successful use cases that, hey, Copilot just saved me an hour creating this presentation. And again, if you do the cost, $30 a month, $360 a year, you can come up with an ROI of, hey, I need to save an information worker just 3 hours throughout the year with this Copilot to have a return on my investment. So we want to be amplifying those successful use cases. We've also seen a really cool repository for prompts. The PMP community out there, they've put together a list of successful prompts. And just like you have document repositories and SOP repositories, now you can have these prompt repositories where people can submit their prompts and share what they've learned and how best to get it out of the LLM. And then the last thing around adoption, just understand not all languages are supported yet, nor are all regions. So if you go into your rollout thinking that you're going to roll out to the entire world, you might run into some adoption problems because it doesn't work with their native tongue, or users go to sign in and it's not supported in their region. So understand that when rolling out, you should roll out to those selected markets that Copilot for Microsoft 365 is available in. And then also just make sure that individuals know that not all languages are supported yet. All right, the next category around these challenges is cost, right? $30 a month. Yeah. Your E5 does not get you this for free. You need to go on top of that E5, put this $30. And so choosing the right type of Copilot is really important. we're talking about Copilot from Microsoft 365, but we've had conversation with customers that say, yeah, our developers are really really chomping at the bit to get Copilot for their GitHub. And we're like, wait a second, this is a totally different technology. You should probably be looking at the GitHub Copilot or Copilot Studios if you're going to be developing your own. But understand choosing the right version of Copilot is very important. We also want to be able to monitor the usage. We have a tendency in Microsoft to blanket license everybody, right? We say, oh, you're a frontline worker, so you get an F3 license and a Teams audio conferencing. You're an information worker, you're getting an E5. But we encourage you to look at the usage. If people are not making use of Copilot from Microsoft 365, then how do we claw back those licenses and give it to people that actually do need them, or that could be more productive or more creative with Copilot for Microsoft 365? Microsoft Admin Center has some rudimentary reports around Copilot usage. So certainly that's a good place to start with, but also reaching out and doing surveys and check-ins is a way that we recommend. And then lastly, capping the use of some of the other Copilots. This isn't really Copilot for Microsoft 365 specific, but know that once you turn on one Copilot, people are going to start using Copilot Studio. And what we would hate to see is somebody make use of a technology and advertise it only to realize that it would cost the company millions of dollars a year in compute costs just to run. So really understanding how to monitor and budget that Copilot usage. And lastly, this was the catch-all, when we talk to customers and we go in and implement, these are some other things that come up. Developer skills, the new skill set in order to customize or extend the graph. We also see that there's a trend of overusing AI in use cases. So there's this kind of mistrust of AI brewing where, auto-generated summaries of meetings, if they're being sent out every day, and consistently incorrect because the meeting is hosted with a language that isn't understood, you're going to start to see this mistrust in Copilot. And so just identifying the overusage and correcting them is going to go a long way. And then just making sure that your infrastructure, both networking, applications, and services, are meeting the prerequisites. A lot of companies have M3 or their networks locked down, so there's some new endpoints that need to be opened up. Understand that Copilot for Outlook requires the new Outlook, and then also just the Microsoft 365 apps that are deployed to people's computers need to be in that monthly channel or current channel. So getting those set up beforehand is going to go a long way, because when you assign the license and tell people, hooray, it's here, if you don't have that right version of Office, you're going to get people calling the help desk, saturating their lines, and people scratching their heads, and ultimately leading to a bad experience. All right, so that's just some of the challenges, but don't get me wrong, like this is a great technology. And so what we've done is come up with a few best practices around rolling out Copilot and in the change management portion. So first off, assess your current state. Understand, are you doing well with your retention and sensitivity labels? Do you have policies in place around data governance? Are your users trained with DLP and understand sensitive data? This one's big. This is something that you probably already do on an annual basis, but there are a few extra items that we put in a checklist that are specific to Copilot, such as those ones I mentioned. The next one is identify those use cases that are good or great for generative AI. You know, they're not all use cases should be thrown into Microsoft 365 Copilot. You know, find the ones that are what Microsoft built the product for, such as being more productive inside of Outlook, being more collaborative inside of Teams. You know, if you have a business analyst that's looking to summarize meeting notes or come up with action items from meetings, that's a great use case. Microsoft built Copilot for M365 for that use case. So find those people and start with them. You know, get easy, quick wins up front. Next is kind of developing that Copilot roadmap. We're only talking about Microsoft 365 Copilot right now, but you should have a roadmap for each of the various Copilots Microsoft offers. And in fact, the first one that most companies roll out is Microsoft Copilot. It's free. You know, it's the new version of Bing Search for Enterprise. But it's a big win because, you know, your users are going to go find these generative AI models. They're going to go into ChatGPT and start giving prompts to ChatGPT free. They're going to go into DALL-E and generate images, right? And anytime your users are off doing something with tools that you don't support, you've got some issues, right? You've got your help desk needs to now understand these tools. There's cost models around those tools. And so Microsoft Copilot is that very generic chat GPT replacement. So developing your Copilot roadmap, start with Microsoft Copilot. It's free for anybody with an F3, E3, any of those license types. And it's built into Windows now, Edge, and it has its own website. Start with that one. It's the basic one. And then go into Microsoft 365 Copilot, or I'm sorry, Copilot for Microsoft 365. The next one, partner with a Copilot expert, right? It's rare that you have rolled out Copilot before. Maybe you have at a previous job last year and then got a new job this year, but partners are in there rolling out Copilot to many organizations. So we understand some of those pitfalls. We understand these best practices. We also have a slew of prompts that we've found work well. And so we can walk through what makes up a good prompt. You know, for your company, you should probably be using a sentence in your prompt of "for a technical person," stuff like that. Next best practice is choose a phased rollout. I've seen once a big bang rollout with this type of technology, and it just fell flat on its face. No one understood. It was it's a brand new way of doing things. And so, you spend all of this money for licensing and you assign it to everybody. And then all of a sudden you're hearing that, oh, Copilot can't do this. And you're like, well, yeah, it was never meant to. Or your help desk starts getting inundated because Copilot doesn't work on my iOS device. Things like that. So always choose a phased rollout, include, pilot phase. And in fact, the next slide or 2 slides, I have a sample rollout strategy. Like we said, always provide training, effective communication for change management. Microsoft has a lot of great material out there, PowerPoints, adoption guide. If you go to adoption.microsoft.com, there's a Copilot rollout adoption kit already. So check that stuff out, but make it specific to your company. Don't just, take what they have and send it out. Remove things that are not pertinent to your industry. Some of, if you're in the financial industry, take out the piece about how Copilot for Microsoft 365, excludes PII data. Like, that's not relevant to what your industry is. I think we've talked about this one in the previous slide, but amplify those success stories. We find creating a Viva Engage community around the AI Center of Excellence or AI Champion Network, a network of champions, something like that, so that you can gather these ideas and then amplify it. And then always evaluate and refine your approach. With this type of technology, it is changing so frequently that a use case that once was impossible for Copilot is now standard. So constantly be looking to improve your messaging around what Copilot is used for, and then also refining use cases that might not be relevant anymore. All right, so we put together, this is a slide that we usually will lead with when we're talking about the rollout of Microsoft 365 Copilot at a company. We'll talk about these different phases. So first is that readiness assessment. We talked about that checklist, assess your environment, make sure that you've looked at your retention policies, your security sensitivity labels, make sure the prerequisites are in place. Next is preparing your environment. So if you notice anything from your readiness assessment, now is the time to implement it, because you want to do this before you enable users with Copilot. So that could be adding additional sensitivity labels. It could be creating some type of training material that's used as a gate. We've seen this successful where you must complete training like Copilot 101 in order to get a label, in order to get a license. So gating licenses is a common practice with other tools. We've seen it be successful here as well. And that's something you could need to do in that preparation stage. Also, now's the time to start identifying use cases, building that ROI, making sure you're able to report ROI, whether through surveys or through the reports in Microsoft Admin Center. And then jump into the configuration phase where we're starting to enable the correct version of Microsoft 365 apps. So make sure they have the new Outlook, make sure that some of those, the licenses are available. Also, just note that OneDrive is required. Most companies already have it enabled, but run into a couple where the OneDrive is still on-prem through the My Drive or My Sites, if you can imagine that. So just know that OneDrive is a prerequisite. And then you jump into a pilot deployment. So, get that material, the training material that we talked about, use that as part of your pilot and refine the training material. If it doesn't resonate, change it because you're going to be using that training material for the broader company eventually. Also, pilot deployments are a great opportunity to test out your process and your communications. So, send the same welcome emails that you would send in your production go live during your pilot, so that you can flush out any spelling mistakes or any irrelevant data. And then conduct training and support during your pilot. We always recommend twice weekly pilot check-ins because these pilot users have a day job. They're not going to be very proactive about filling out surveys in their off hours or writing up use cases that work and didn't work. So have these twice weekly drop-in sessions to gain the pulse of the pilot users. I think that's a big one that we do not only for Copilot rollout, but also for any other application rollout. The next one is monitor, right? Now that you've done your pilot, you can go into a more broad rollout. Make sure your monitoring is in place up front. It's too many times that we, think after the fact, oh, it would be great to get a baseline of where everybody was with this certain, metric a month after we roll out a technology. So it could be the number of emails sent, the number of IMs sent, that type of stuff. But make sure that you're tracking your metrics up front, and then you're also reporting on them throughout this phase. And once you have this now in kind of a mainstream, then we start looking at extending the Copilot for Microsoft 365. Talk about, what other line of business systems would I like to see returned back when I type in a prompt? What message extensions would be important inside of Teams? And then ultimately, if there is a use case that's better suited for Copilot Studios or Azure AI Studios, look into those low code or custom code solutions. Great. So I think I introduced myself as somebody who comes from a productivity or collaboration background as well as security. And so when we look at it with a security lens, we'd like to see these areas or these capabilities addressed in the different phases. There's no silver bullet that will get you from 0 to 100 for DLP in one day, right? You're going to have to do incremental updates to your DLP configuration. And so out of all these categories or capabilities, we broke them into 4 phases. Phase 0, most every company that I've worked with already has this already implemented. They already have some type of change management guidelines. They have data classification already. I mean, it's 2024. This isn't new to us. But phase 1, we start to improve these. So, is there a sensitivity label for generative AI content, right? Do we need to put in retention policies around libraries that hold generative AI content? All of these things we have to incrementally get better at until phase 3, when we have a really good understanding of, our record retention, our data classification, our sensitivity labels, those things. So this might not be a roadmap for your company because you might already be at 100% mature with your, reporting in analytics, but this is those capabilities that we at NetWoven look at when implementing Copilot. Think of it as a maturity model of, how mature are you for your Copilot readiness. All right. So that wraps up the majority of the technical content. Just some next steps. NetWoven offers a free governance and security primer workshop. So if you want to assess your environment when it comes to governance and security, NetWoven offers a free workshop. We also offer advanced in-depth workshops around that same topic. And then we are offering readiness assessments so that we give you checklists of, how ready are you to roll out Copilot for Microsoft 365. Everybody's going to get a copy of this slide deck and the ebook via email. But if you did have any specific follow-ups or you want to engage with NetWoven in any of these, just email info@netwoven.com and one of my awesome colleagues will reply to you. All right. And so I think that opens up for Q&A. So Dan, you can be the moderator. I saw a lot of questions come in. I didn't have time to start answering it. So if you want to just read them
Sure.
out, I can answer them.
Sure, absolutely. So while we're doing that, folks, I am going to launch a poll just so we can see where everybody is in terms of their adoption of Copilot for Microsoft 365. Matt, I really like two things that you brought up. One being that Copilot for Microsoft 365, it's not just a new way of searching, it's like a new way, it's a way of doing new things. And I think that's really an important principle for people to kind of get their minds around. And I think the other thing is that along with that, and along with all that enthusiasm, there are challenges. People have to have their security posture in place. And there are some best practices to follow to make sure that the rollout goes well and it's considered a positive for the organization. So with that in mind, what I wanted to do is just ask you a few questions, and then we're also going to answer any questions that we get in the Q&A. So you'll see a little Q&A icon on your window, and if you've got a question you want to submit, you can put it in there. We'll answer it during the webinar, and if we can't get it during the webinar, then we'll follow up with you and answer it after that. All right, so Matt, we see Microsoft, big change. You don't have to buy 300 licenses to get going now. You can buy just one license. By the way, that's going to blow the doors off everything. So now here I am. I'm a customer. I've got Microsoft 365 E5 license. How do I get Copilot? How do I get Copilot for Microsoft 365?
Yeah, so all the CSPs, the licensing partners, have access to Copilot SKUs now. And so just work with your licensing partner and you can purchase 100, whatever it is, of the Copilot license. You are, I think, still required to do a year-long commitment. So you don't,
Okay.
yeah, you have to do that year-long.
Okay.
But
okay.
you're right. I mean, there are large companies that just want to put a toe into generative AI, didn't
Right.
want to commit 100K to the project because 300 times 30 times 12, it's a big commitment, and so this opens it up even for larger companies that want to play.
Yeah, excellent. So next question, Matt, and I think you talked a little bit about this, but let's just reiterate. Does Copilot for Microsoft 365 have access to all of my emails and chat?
Yeah, and so that's kind of the scary one. Just like search, when SharePoint search rolled out or M365 search rolled out, you got to see, wait a second, I have access to a lot of this data. Delve, for example, Delve was highlighting content that was sent via email. So yeah, Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365 has access to all of that because it has access to the graph, but it's permissioned to just what you have access to. So rest assured that it's just exposing the problem in your organization, not creating the problem. So yeah.
Okay, excellent. Now, another question. So if I'm a customer and I'm using sensitivity labels to encrypt confidential documents, is Copilot going to be able to bypass those rights management settings and labels?
Yeah, so the modern version of MPIP, Microsoft Purview Information Protection, uh, does allow the graph to do full text search on that content. That's only if you're up to date with your sensitivity labels. If you're using older file formats like doc or XLS, or even like a third-party encryption tool, the Copilot for Microsoft 365 cannot decrypt those, and so you would be losing out on any of the content inside there. But if you're up to date with MPIP, and then you should be good.
Okay, fabulous. All right, here's another question. So this has all been very interesting, really intriguing stuff. I want to move forward, figure out how to get a pilot going, what's the first thing I should worry about?
I think assessing your current state. I think that's kind of the biggest one. Understand, are you a week out from starting your pilot, or are you like a year out because you have no DLP, no sensitivity labels, no retention policies, tons of customizations of the graph? Like, that's the first thing to do is assess your current state and understand how quickly can I start this pilot.
Okay. Okay, great. My last question before we go back to some of the questions that are in the Q&A. So my wife works for a Dutch company. Are they going to be able to roll out Copilot for Microsoft 365?
The Netherlands. So yes, it's available. However, Dutch is not a supported language quite yet. I know it's on the roadmap, but I believe unless it was also announced this week, Dutch is not a supported language. So they could
Okay.
use it as long as they were able to prompt
Use it in
English.
English.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, great. So we have
Great.
a few questions in the chat. We have one question from a good friend of mine who's asking, does Microsoft have not-for-profit pricing for Copilot for Microsoft 365? I don't believe I've seen that yet. I do expect that we'll see it, but not yet.
Yeah,
And then,
I would
I'm sorry.
imagine it follows. So if you use like TechSoup or any of the other nonprofit avenues to get your licensing, they'd be able to tell you better. We use a licensing company called Arrow, and Arrow did not have nonprofit pricing yet.
Right. Okay. Okay, so another question that comes up is, does Copilot, I'm sorry, can we get a link to, you mentioned like a site for good prompts? Do we have a link that we can share with people on that?
Oh yeah, yeah. So if you search, I think chat's disabled here, but if you search PMP prompt repository,
Okay.
the PMP is the patterns and practice community at Microsoft. So these are MVPs and some product folks. They've put together a repository within GitHub of prompts. And now I believe they're kind of specific to the Power Platform solution. However, we've been seeing people create SharePoint lists and linking them through Viva Engage, and the list is basically the prompt and a rating on how well the prompt did. So, if I found an awesome prompt that generated me the top 5 steps for migrating insert technology, then I could post that into my SharePoint list, and people in my Viva Engage channel or community could see it.
Okay, terrific. We do have one participant that says he's not able to use the QA. It's grayed out for him. If that applies to you, please just send us a note at info@netwoven.com. We'll be sure to get your question answered. And we have another question here before we wrap up that I think is great, Matt. How do you secure the administration of Copilot and for M365? It seems to give access to everything.
Yeah, so again, the data it's using is via the graph. And so there's a lot of controls in the graph that allow you to decide what's indexed and what's not. I would probably look there first to see if we could exclude certain SharePoint sites that are, irrelevant, or if you wanted to exclude a workload, like you've hooked up Graph to ServiceNow, you could remove the ServiceNow connector.
Okay.
That has side effects, though. You probably have the connector in place for a reason, but yeah, I would look at that. The administration side of Copilot for Microsoft 365 is still ever evolving, right? We as administrators don't have those granular controls yet. to kind of selectively remove pieces, look at granular reporting. It's going to come, but it's not there yet.
Okay. Okay.
If it's around SharePoint, and I know we're over time, but if it's around SharePoint, the project syntax has some really cool stuff around authoritative sources inside of SharePoint, and you could look at that.
Okay. Perfect. Well, listen, Matt, Gwen, I want to thank you both for great content, great presentation here. Just a reminder, we are going to have another webinar on February 15th. We hope you can join us for that. And if you've got any questions as you think about this, please give us a shout, info@netwoven.com. Be happy to answer your questions. We'll have an ebook that we can send to you, etc. So great topic, great participation, and I just want to say thanks to everybody.
Thanks all. Bye.
All right. Have a great day.